Me? Okay. So I wanted to tell you a little story about, also from the Talmud. So we have this thing called midrash, which are basically kind of the rabbis trying to fill out a scene or try to understand what was going on, because as you probably all know, the Old Testament, or what we call the Torah, is written very sparingly. Right? There's not a lot of detail. So there's a moment where they're wondering, as we are reading in our reading this week, what's going on with Moses up in the cloud with God? And one of the rabbis postulated that Moses is sitting up in the cloud watching God write the Torah with a beautiful quill pen. And God is adding these little special crowns on the letters. And Moses is like, what are you doing? What are you making? You're like adding these. I thought you said that we weren't supposed to add or take anything away from this thing. God says, yeah, but you're going to do it anyway. And there's coming a master teacher who will not only be able to interpret each word, but will be able to interpret each letter of each word. And not only that, but the space between the letters. So I have to give him something extra to do, so I'm putting these crowns on the letters so they should interpret those. Moses says, wow, this guy sounds pretty amazing. He says, yeah, he's going to be amazing. Moses said, I'd love to see that. I'd like to meet him. God says, okay, turn around. And God uses its time turner, fast forwards a couple thousand years, and plops Moses into the yeshiva, into the learning center of Rabbi Akiva. And the way that the yeshivas were set up is that the smartest students sat up in the front, the most advanced students were in the very front, and the dunces were in the back. So Moses ends up in the back with the blockheads. He's sitting in the back, listening to this teaching from Rabbi Akiva, and he can't understand a bloody thing the guy says. And he nudges the dope next to him and says, listen, who's he talking about? And the guy goes, Moses. He's talking about Moses, you idiot. What are you? You're worse than me. And Moses does not recognize his own teachings. As this moment, this profound moment of realizing that our future is in somebody else's hands.
I wonder too if Jesus was sitting in the back row, our kind of main guy, Jesus, was sitting in the back row, what he would recognize of his teachings today. If he was incognito, would we recognize him? And would he recognize what we're doing here? There's this great story that in this very kind of well-heeled church in the suburbs, it was a Sunday morning, and folks were coming into church, and there's a homeless man lying on the steps of the church. And most people going in, they were in a hurry, they were late, they're trying to get their right seat. They go on, they just kind of go on by. A number of people murmured something, I'm not sure what it was. And a few people, leaned over and said, could you just move off the steps, we're trying to get into church. So the service started, the big organ started, the choir sang, not as beautifully as this choir, but the choir sang. The preacher began to preach, and about halfway through, the homeless man walks up the aisle, and the preacher he's not used to this, just stops, and all of a sudden, a voice says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. What you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. And then leaves the church. I think that Christians have domesticated Jesus so much. We've put him in a suit and a tie, or at least in Dockers and an Oxford shirt. But I wonder how he would look at what we're doing. I wonder how he would look at the text we're reading. I wonder how a rabbi would look at the Transfiguration text today. Well, luckily we have a rabbi.
Well, the first thing that leapt off the page to my eye and to my heart, because of the way that I've been trained to read, is that the response to seeing this miraculous appearance of these two great prophets standing next to their Rabbi, that the response of the disciple was to separate them. He says, let's build a tent for each one of them, instead of let's build a tent for all of them, or let's hear what the three of you have to say about where we're at right now, or any other possibilities, but that there was immediately a desire to divide and to separate those various teachers. And no?
Yeah, and that's what, when Jhos and I read the text together, what you said struck me so much. As he's reading along, the first time he'd ever read this text, all of a sudden he says, oh, that's where the brokenness began, when the separation came. I've heard this text since I was young, and I never saw that. I never thought about that. When I was young, growing up in a very conservative church, the whole point of the story was the ending. They saw Jesus only. That was the whole point of the story. As I got older and began to leave some of those ways and open my heart to many, many things, I began to see this text as Jesus in his full humanity. A human being without defense, a human being without guardedness. That dazzling white was his true humanity shining through. But you know what? I think with Peter, Jhos, if I'm honest, I kind of erased Moses and Elijah too. I forgot in that moment that Jesus was a Jew, was always a Jew. And I wondered how much I had distorted him over the years, and how much we as a Christian tradition had distorted some of the deep, deep messages that he really embodied. So while I've looked at the Transfiguration as something powerfully transformational, it's been our dialogue together that's made me wonder Transfiguration can also lead to distortion.
Easily. That when we move into a place of not being able to see the whole, or actually see what's directly in front of us, we can be very troubled by that. I sort of remember having an experience of that when we were on the trip. We went to Bethlehem, and, I grew up in popular culture. I know that Jesus was born in a manger with cows and camels breathing on him to keep him warm. I know there was a little palm tree out in front of it, and there was a little wooden hut. So we are going into the Church of the Nativity together, and I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be amazing. And we're going down, down, down these very narrow stairs, deeper and deeper into the earth, and we pop out into this kind of dark, like little cramped kind of space, and they go, oh, it's right over there. The cave. The cave? Wait a minute. The cave? And Penny was like close to me, and I'm looking around going, wait, where's the little hut? And like, how the heck did they get a cow down here? That's what I want to know. I'm like looking, going, no, this is all wrong. This couldn't be possibly right. And I'm like, Penny, it's a cave. This is a stone cave, not a little wooden hut with a star over it going like this. And she just like went, yeah? And I sort of realized that there's this moment when we come into a situation with our fixed idea of what it is. And that I was struggling to see what was directly in front of my face or make sense of it. Because I was so clear, it was on this little hill. It was this completely different scene. And that in that moment, I had to transfigure my own thinking.
So that happened for me in a very different way. I didn't have a fixed idea. I had no idea. So I'd been part of, when we were in Israel together, it was, rabbis and Christian clergy together. And we were on the top of David's tomb. And I had many times celebrated Shabbat, but I had never done the closing ceremony of Shabbat, which is called Havdalah. I'd never done that. I'd never been part of that ritual. So here we are. And isn't it when you see the first star that it begins? The third star? So when you see the third star, it begins. So we're up and we're all together. You can hear church bells in the background. You can hear the Muslim call to prayer. And we're looking over the city of Jerusalem. It's absolutely beautiful. We've been together now a number of days, so we're very connected as a group. And the rabbi says we're going to do Havdalah, and explains what it is. And we were all excited about it. So in Havdalah, at the end of Shabbat, once you see the third star, you begin. And there's a special candle, and it's a braided candle. And so my colleague said, would you hold the candle? So I said, sure, hold the candle. So I'm holding the candle, and then at this moment, they light the candle. And remember, we're on a rooftop, it's night, it's a very sacred moment, and a breeze starts to come up. They light the candle, and then somebody whispers to me, don't let the candle go out. I was panicked. Right? I mean, you saw the look on my face. Absolutely.
She broke a sweat.
I did. And the breeze is blowing, and I'm trying to keep this candle going. And what happened
She practically set her hair on fire, putting it around like, I'm not kidding you. She was like this. You were like all over that candle like this.
So then Jhos starts to come over and stand around me, so that
like
the wind,
this.
like this. And then other people, and we had like 4 of us, and I'm in the middle holding this candle so we don't let the light go out, which I thought was a beautiful metaphor, that you have to come together so the light won't go out. So we're having this amazing moment. We're singing. You can still hear church bells and the call to prayer. And I mean, it's magical, even though I'm panicked about the candle. It's magical. It's a beautiful candle. And then you pass around a spice thing. What's it called?
The samim, the spice box. Yeah.
Right. And it's awakening the senses after Shabbat. And then the ceremony starts to come to an end. I'm still hanging on for dear life.
Right, and after the spices, there's a moment where everybody like puts their hands around the candle.
Right.
So we're all absorbing the light from the candle, and we have wine, and we take a drink of wine, and then...
And then Jhos says, okay, plunge the candle into the cup. I'm like, what? Because I can't really hear the winds. People are talking, it's singing, it's beautiful. And he's like, yeah, in the cup. And I'm like, the candle in the cup? And I was panicked that I misheard.
I was like, Penny, we're going to put the candle in the cup now.
And I was so afraid to get it wrong, right? And yeah.
We have this thing in Judaism called chavruta, which is study partners. And as I alluded to earlier, your study partner should be somebody who will really challenge your ideas or comes from a really different perspective, so that your ideas don't get frozen, so that you have got somebody who is as bright as you are, as clever as you are, as funny as you are, as hardworking as you are, who punches holes in your fixed beliefs. Penny and I were amazing chavruta along the way. Because we experience these moments again and again. Those are just 2 little examples of watching our fixed ideas, even if they were very recently formed fixed ideas, have to change, have to transfigure, have to shift and depart from our attachment to them. And that is part of how we help each other grow. Part of how we help each other stay flexible and fluid and open.
So when we did Havruta on the Transfiguration story, and that was Jhos's immediate response, it began to open up for me a way of looking not only at Scripture, but at that particular story, and how we do this project of kind of becoming human together, how we do that. And I think in all traditions, but I'll speak to the Christian tradition, I think for many of us, we get our ideas frozen. I mean, Jhos, you just said something about that. And I think if we grow up in a religious environment, sometimes our religious ideas are very frozen, and they don't grow with us as we grow and change. And what happens is that then our faith can become distorted. And, we have certain traditions because they have meaning. They have meaning to us. If you grew up in the religious tradition, you may love a hymn, not because you even, stay with me now, not because you even believe the words necessarily, but because that hymn holds memory and meaning. It reminds you of a time and a place that you sang that hymn as much as what it may or may not mean today. You with me on that? And I think that one of the ways, Jhos, that I've started to think about how we distort our faith, a good measure for that is a measure that I give myself. I ought to be able to talk about my faith, hold my truths, small t, in a way that doesn't exclude others or diminish others. Always. Even if I might be talking about something that you have no idea about what I'm talking about, it may not hold meaning for you, but it should never diminish you. It should never make anyone feel that they can't be part in some way and that they are not equally, fully embodied image of God. And anything, I believe, that doesn't hold up to that becomes a distortion of our faith traditions.
I'm going to go slightly off book here because when we were sitting, I noticed something else in the scripture.
Okay.
And that is that after this proclamation that Peter makes, that we should have these separate houses, and then it says they were terrified. And then God speaks, and God says, listen to him. Now, to the best of my knowledge, from a rabbinic point of view, it seems to me that Jesus was teaching a message of unity, was talking about an evolution of spirituality. He was talking about what binds us together in this project of being human. And he was talking, in fact, about the omnipresent danger of distortion. God says, listen to him. Maybe that's the crucial line. How do we listen? How do we really listen and not just see what we want to see, but how do we listen to things that might be challenging to our fixed ideas? And how do we not distort that invitation to stepping outside of our powerful uniqueness into our commonality? Moses and Jesus and Elijah together come from a foundation stone of wisdom. When we were in Jerusalem, we were walking on stones all the time. And those stones were no longer the stones that Jesus or Moses or Elijah or Muhammad or any number of tourists have walked on, or marauders for that point. They were stones that needed to be there to continue moving people from one point to another. And yet underneath and underneath and underneath was this foundation of wisdom and courage and spirituality that we all shared. The real task is how do we live together? The real task is how do we see each other? The real task is how do we listen? And so let's listen again to these last words of Amichai's incredible poem. And imagine yourself sitting somewhere on those stones, you being the object of someone's observation and learning.
Once I sat on the steps by a gate at David's Tower. I placed my 2 heavy baskets at my side. A group of tourists was standing around their guide, and I became their target marker. You see that man with the baskets? Just right of his head, There's an arch from the Roman period, just right of his head. But he's moving. He's moving.
I said to myself, redemption will come only if their guide tells them, you see that arch from the Roman period? It's not important. But next to it, left and down a bit, there sits a man who's bought fruit and vegetables for his family. May we come to appreciate the foundation that we all share. May we walk together in that great, great endeavor of finding the fruits and vegetables for our collective spiritual families. Thank you.
Amen and amen.